The Viridian summit station hung like a jeweled crown above the violet clouds of Axis Prime. For 3 cycles it had been neutral ground, a place where ancient enemies came to speak instead of slaughter. Tonight, representatives from 17 species filled its grand chamber, their voices a cacophony of clicks, hums, and translated syllables. They had come to prevent a war that would consume half the galaxy. Captain Elias Ward stood at the edge of the human delegation, his dress uniform crisp and uncomfortable. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was a frigate commander, not a diplomat. But when Ambassador Chen fell ill at the last moment, Command had pulled Ward from patrol duty and thrust him into a room where every word could mean peace or annihilation. The Kryn delegation sat across the chamber, tall, insectoid beings whose chittering language sounded like breaking glass. Beside them, the Sulari floated in their crystalline containment spheres, their bioluminescent bodies pulsing with barely contained hostility. These 2 civilizations had been at each other's throats for a generation. The summit was humanity's last attempt to broker peace before their conflict ignited the entire outer rim. The territorial adjustments are unacceptable, Ambassador Kelvash of the Kryn hissed, his mandibles clicking with agitation. The Solari encroach on sacred breeding grounds. Sacred? The Solari envoy's translated voice dripped venom. You call them sacred after stripping 3 moons of their resources? You are locusts in diplomats' clothing. Ward felt the tension in the room spike. His hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. Not there. Weapons were forbidden at the summit. He glanced at the Galactic Arbiter, an ancient veil whose 4 eyes surveyed the room with weary wisdom. Delegates, please. The Arbiter's voice resonated with harmonics that demanded attention. We stand on the precipice of understanding. Do not let old wounds... The lights went out for 3 heartbeats. Darkness consumed the chamber. Then came the sound. A sharp crack like ice breaking, followed by a wet thud that Ward recognized instantly. Someone had fired a weapon. Impossible. Security was absolute. Emergency lighting flickered to life, bathing the room in red. The Arbiter lay crumpled on the floor, blue blood pooling beneath his ceremonial robes. Chaos erupted. Delegates scattered, security forces rushed in, and accusations flew like missiles. Treachery. The summit is compromised. Ward moved toward the Arbiter, his military training overriding the diplomatic protocols. He knelt beside the fallen veil, checking for vital signs with hands that knew combat medicine better than conference rooms. The wound was precise, a projectile weapon probably chemically propelled to bypass energy shields. Don't touch him. A Kryn security officer lunged forward, weapon drawn. Human, step away from the body! Ward raised his hand slowly. I'm trying to help. You were closest when the lights failed, another voice accused. Ward turned to see a Solari sphere hovering near, its occupant glowing an angry crimson. Your species brokers this summit, yet now our mediator lies dead. Convenient. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Ward felt every eye in the chamber turned toward him. Suspicious, afraid, angry. He wanted to defend himself, to explain, but his training kicked in. Never speak first in hostile territory. Assess, adapt, survive. The Kryn officer approached with restraints. Captain Elias Ward of the Terran Coalition Navy. You are hereby detained pending investigation into the assassination of Arbiter Volmesh. This is insane, Ward said quietly, but he didn't resist as the restraints clicked around his wrists. Fighting would only confirm their suspicions. I didn't... Save your words, human. The officer's mandibles clicked dismissively. Your weapon discharge residue will speak louder than your denials. They were going to test him for residue. Standard procedure. Ward felt a cold stone form in his stomach because he knew what they would find. 3 days ago, he'd been on a firing range recertifying his small arms qualifications. The residue could still be on his hands, his uniform. It would prove nothing about tonight. But in the court of fear and suspicion, proof and truth were different languages. As they led him from the chamber, Ward caught the eye of Commander Sarah Reeves from his own delegation. She looked stricken, helpless. He gave her the slightest nod, the silent communication of soldiers who understand that sometimes you follow orders even when they seem wrong. The corridor outside the summit chamber was a nightmare of flashing lights and armed guards from a dozen species. News was already spreading. Ward could see it in the way the guards looked at him, not as a prisoner, but as the spark that would ignite galactic war. If humanity's own captain had assassinated the peace arbiter, then the summit was a trap. Diplomacy was dead. and every species would retreat to their battle fleets. They took him to a holding cell, a small room with energy barriers and enough space to pace 3 steps in any direction. Through the translucent wall, he could see the station's main viewport. Outside ships were already departing. The summit was collapsing, alliances fracturing in real time. Ward sat on the narrow bench and forced himself to think like a captain, not a prisoner. Someone had planned this perfectly. They'd known about the security protocols, the timing, the light failure. They'd killed the one person everyone respected, and they'd made sure a human would take the blame. The question wasn't just who, it was why. And Ward had approximately 12 hours to find the answer, before the first shots of a galactic war burned across the stars. He looked at his restrained hands and smiled grimly. They'd made one mistake. They'd accused the wrong human. The holding cell hummed with the low frequency of containment fields. Ward had been staring at the ceiling for 2 hours, cataloging everything he'd seen in those crucial seconds before darkness fell. The mind was a weapon. His instructors at the academy had drilled that into every cadet. When your ship is disabled and your crew is dead, your thoughts are your last ammunition. The door's energy field shimmered and a figure stepped through. Ward recognized her immediately, Lieutenant Zara Thex, a Kryn security analyst he'd met briefly during the pre-summit briefings. Her compound eyes reflected the cell's harsh lighting and fractured rainbows. Captain Ward. Her voice came through a translator pin, stripped of the clicking undertones. I need you to understand something. When they find the evidence they're looking for, you will be executed. Not tried. Executed. The Galactic Council has invoked emergency protocols. Ward sat up slowly. You came here to tell me I'm going to die? Thoughtful. I came because I've been reviewing the security footage. Thex moved closer to the containment field, her antennae twitching with what Ward had learned was anxiety. Something is wrong with the timeline. For the first time since his arrest, Ward felt a flicker of hope. Talk to me. The lights failed at 21:47:13 station time. The shot that killed the Arbiter was fired at 21:47:14 1 second later. But the backup lighting systems activated at 21:47:15 and the records show you didn't move until 21:47:17. You were 3 seconds behind. Ward's mind raced. 3 seconds isn't much. It's everything. Thex's mandibles clicked rapidly. A human's reaction time under stress is approximately 0.25 seconds. Even accounting for shock, you should have moved within 1 second. But you didn't. You stood still for 2 full seconds after the shot. Why? Ward closed his eyes, forcing himself back into that moment. The darkness. The crack of the weapon. His hand moving toward where his sidearm should have been. Then, nothing. He'd frozen, listening. I was trying to locate the source of the sound. The acoustics in that chamber are complex, sound bounces. I couldn't pinpoint where the shot came from. Exactly. Thex's eyes seemed to brighten. You behaved like someone trying to identify a threat, not like someone who had just fired a weapon and knew exactly where they were standing. But here's what troubles me more. I can't find the moment the weapon entered the chamber. Security scanned everyone. Yes. 3 times. Energy signatures, chemical compounds, mass displacement. Nothing should have passed through. Thex glanced over her shoulder at the door. Captain, I'm not supposed to be here. My commanding officer has already decided you're guilty, but I'm a security analyst because I believe in evidence, not convenient narratives. Something here doesn't fit. Ward stood and approached the containment field until he was close enough to see his reflection in Thex's compound eyes. Then help me find what does fit. Who benefits from the Arbiter's death? Everyone and no one. The Arbiter was the only figure both Kryn and Sulari trusted. Without him, the summit fails, war becomes inevitable, and... She stopped, antennae going rigid. And the weapons manufacturers profit. The border systems panic and buy defenses. The military factions gain power. Follow the money, Ward said quietly. Oldest investigative principle in the galaxy. Before Thex could respond, alarms screamed through the station. The lights shifted from white to amber, station-wide alert. Through the cell's small viewport, Ward saw a bloom of fire against the stars. A ship had just exploded in orbit. Ancestors preserve us, Thex whispered. The Sulari diplomatic vessel. They're saying it was destroyed by a Kryn warship. Ward felt the walls closing in. Not the walls of his cell, the walls of time. The war's already starting. Whoever planned this isn't waiting for investigations or trials. They're forcing the issue. I need to go. Thex turned toward the door, then hesitated. Captain, if I'm right about you, then someone very powerful wants you to die for something you didn't do. Watch your back, even in here. She disappeared through the energy field, leaving Ward alone with the sirens and his racing thoughts. He moved to the viewport and watched as more ships broke formation, as running lights became targeting lasers, as 1,000 years of fragile peace shattered like glass. The door opened again. This time it was Commander Reeves, flanked by 2 guards. Her face was pale, her uniform disheveled. Elias, they're moving up your tribunal. 1 hour. They're not even pretending it's a fair process anymore. Sarah, listen to me. Ward kept his voice low, urgent. The weapon that killed the Arbiter. It had to be something that could bypass security and be assembled or activated inside the chamber. That means either someone smuggled in components disguised as something else, or the weapon was already there, built into the station itself. Reeves's eyes widened. The station? Elias, the Viridian Summit Station, was constructed by a consortium. 3 companies split the contract. Let me guess. Defense contractors, Hellion Industries, Karth Dynamics, and Vex Security Solutions. All 3 have been lobbying against the peace accords for months. They called it premature demilitarization. Reeves gripped the edge of the containment field. If they built weapons into the station's infrastructure, then this was never about peace. Ward felt the pieces clicking into place. This whole summit was theater. They built the stage, wrote the script, and cast a human as the villain. The question is, how do we prove it with an hour left and me locked in a cage? Reeves looked at him with something between despair and determination. You don't, but I might. She pulled out her datapad and began typing rapidly. There's a maintenance junction 3 levels below the summit chamber. If someone installed a concealed weapon system, there'd be power signatures, modified conduits, something. I can access the engineering logs. Commander, if you're caught investigating this, they'll arrest you too. Then I'd better not get caught. Reeves met his eyes. You once told me that the mark of a good officer isn't following orders. It's knowing when to follow your conscience instead. Well, Captain, my conscience says you're innocent, and if I do nothing, we'll have a war that kills billions. So I'm going to find evidence, or I'm going to die trying. She turned and walked out before Ward could respond. Through the viewport, another explosion bloomed. Smaller this time, a fighter craft or shuttle. The shooting had begun in earnest now. Skirmishes that would become battles that would become a war with no winners. Ward pressed his palm against the cold wall of his cell and made himself a promise. If he died today, it wouldn't be as the man who started a galactic war. It would be as the man who tried to stop one 1 hour. Truth had 60 minutes to outrun fear. The clock was ticking. The tribunal chamber was designed for judgment, not justice. Ward stood in the center of a circular platform, surrounded by holographic projections of representatives from 11 species. The Galactic Council had assembled in record time, not to investigate but to make an example. Outside the station, the first real engagement of the war was unfolding. 3 Kryn fighters had fired on a Solari transport. 17 lives lost in the opening salvo of what historians would call inevitable. Ward refused to let it be inevitable. High Magistrate Veilcor, a gray-skinned being whose species had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic history, activated the proceedings with a gesture. Captain Elias Ward of Earth, you stand accused of assassinating Arbiter Volmesh and deliberately sabotaging the Peace Summit. Evidence shows weapon residue on your hands. Opportunity and motive align. How do you answer? Ward took a breath. Every instinct screamed at him to defend himself. To argue the residue meant nothing, to plead for more time. But he'd learned something in his years commanding a frigate. Sometimes the best tactic was to change the battlefield entirely. I answer with a question, Magistrate. Who benefits from my guilt? A murmur rippled through the council. Veilcor's expression didn't change. This is not a philosophical debate, Captain. This is a tribunal. Then let me present evidence. Ward gestured toward the holographic display surrounding him. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a politician. I'm a soldier, and soldiers know how to recognize tactics. This wasn't an assassination, it was an operation. Military precision, perfect timing, a scapegoat positioned exactly where needed. Whoever planned this didn't just want the Arbiter dead. They wanted humanity blamed. They wanted war. Speculation, one of the Kryn counselors hissed. Human words to delay justice. Is it? Ward's voice hardened. Then explain how a weapon passed through 3 security screenings. Explain why the station's backup lighting was delayed by exactly 2 seconds. Just long enough for the shooter to act, but not long enough for anyone to see. Explain why the summit station, built by defense contractors, had power conduits running directly beneath the Arbiter's platform that weren't in the original architectural plans. The chamber went silent. Ward pushed forward. I can't explain those things because I didn't plan them. But someone did. Someone with access to station construction records. Someone with the technical expertise to install a concealed weapons system. Someone who profits when peace fails. The holographic display flickered. Commander Reeves's face appeared on an auxiliary channel. She looked exhausted but triumphant. Magistrate, I'm transmitting data now. Engineering logs from the station's construction phase, cross-referenced with power consumption records from the past week. Diagrams flooded the displays, technical schematics with highlighted sections showing modified conduits, unauthorized power draws, and a spiderweb of connections leading to a single point, directly beneath where the Arbiter had stood. A gasp echoed through the council chamber. This is a rail accelerator, Reeves continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. Compact, powerful, and nearly undetectable when built into existing infrastructure. It was installed during the station's construction 2 years ago, then activated remotely during the summit. The shot came from below, through the floor, not from anyone in the room. Ward saw the shift in the council's body language, the subtle lean forward, the exchanged glances. Doubt was a crack in a dam, and truth was the flood waiting behind it, but Veilcor raised a hand. This evidence suggests a conspiracy, Commander, but it doesn't prove Captain Ward's innocence. He could have been complicit. He could have activated the device. No. A new voice cut through the chamber. Lieutenant Thex, standing at the chamber entrance with a data core in her hands. I have the activation codes. They were transmitted from a ship that departed the station 17 minutes before the assassination. A ship registered to Helion Industries, carrying 3 executives who'd been lobbying against the peace accords for 8 months. She stepped forward, her compound eyes fixed on the council. I'm Kryn. My people are at war with the Solari. Every instinct tells me to hate, to fight, to let this human burn for our pain. But I'm also a security analyst, and the evidence doesn't lie. Captain Ward is innocent. We've been manipulated, all of us, into a war that serves no one except those who sell weapons and fear. The chamber erupted. Delegates argued, shouted, demanded action. Ward stood at the center of the storm, watching as the truth did what weapons couldn't. It made them question their certainty. Veilcor struck the ceremonial chime 3 times, calling for silence. When the chamber quieted, the old magistrate looked at Ward with something that might have been respect. Captain Ward, it appears you were correct. This tribunal has been insufficient. The charges against you are suspended pending full investigation. With respect, magistrate, that's not enough. Ward's voice carried across the chamber with the authority of someone who'd commanded ships in hostile space. Suspending charges keeps me alive, but it doesn't stop the war that's already started. Right now, Kryn and Solari are killing each other because they believe peace was never real. You need to show them it was. You need to broadcast this evidence to every ship, every station, every world. You need to make them see they've been played. A Solari counselor's sphere pulsed with agitation. And if they don't listen? If blood has been spilled and honor demands more blood? Ward turned to face the Solari directly. Then you make a choice. You can have honor or you can have a future. Because I've seen war, counselor. I've watched good people die for bad reasons. And I'm telling you, whoever planned this massacre is betting that you'll choose pride over survival. Don't give them that satisfaction. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Veilcor nodded slowly. Broadcast the evidence. All channels, all frequencies, and send a message to the fleet's immediate ceasefire while this information is verified. They won't all listen, the Kryn counselor said quietly. No, Ward agreed, but enough will. Enough to give peace another chance. Over the next 6 hours, as evidence flooded through the Galactic network, something remarkable happened. Ships pulled back from engagement. Commanders demanded explanations from their governments. 3 Helion Industries executives were arrested trying to flee the sector. The conspiracy unraveled thread by thread, exposing a network of corruption that crossed species lines. The war that should have consumed half the galaxy sputtered and died before it truly began. Not because of superior firepower or brilliant tactics, but because one human refused to accept a convenient lie, because a Kryn analyst chose evidence over prejudice, because a human commander risked her career for truth. 6 months later, Ward stood on the bridge of his frigate, watching the newly reopened Viridian Summit Station through the viewscreen. The Arbiter's replacement, a young Vale named Kashara, was hosting representatives from 23 species now. The peace was fragile, stitched together with trust that had nearly been shattered. "Captain, incoming transmission from the station," his communications officer reported. "It's Lieutenant Thex. She's asking if you'll join the Security Council as a human liaison." Ward smiled. "Tell her I'm a frigate commander, not a diplomat." "She said you'd say that, sir." She also said, "The mark of a good officer is knowing when to follow your conscience instead of orders." "Those were your words, apparently." Ward laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. Tell her I'll think about it." As his ship moved into patrol formation around the station, Ward reflected on something his first captain had told him years ago. "We don't join the Navy to fight wars, Lieutenant. We join to prevent them." He'd prevented one, not with weapons or threats, but with something more powerful. The simple, stubborn human belief that truth matters more than convenience, that justice is worth fighting for even when fighting seems impossible. The galaxy had learned something that day. When you accuse a human of starting a war, you'd better be certain of your facts, because if you're wrong, that same human might just stop one instead.